your book you have these bullet points at the end of every chapter. So could you do like a 4 bullet points of the book?
Yes. We talk about general subjects. For instance, there is a chapter about sadhus, what does it mean to be a pilgrim, but not only in the historical point of view, relating it with modern things so that people can understand it. For instance, in the chapter dedicated to karma, that we are talking about the law of retribution into this life, we are talking about John Lennon, we are talking about Radiohead, we are talking about the general concept, because there are already very good authors and very good scholars talking about technically about these religious concepts. We wanted to bring it to the pop culture.
Okay, so Shashi, so when in fact I was asked this question about what is Hinduism, I took the easy way out and said read Shashi Tharoor's book. And we actually had a book club meeting and we read your book, Why I'm a Hindu. So if you could perhaps answer this question, because you do it very well in the book, as well as anyone I've seen doing it, about this whole definitional problem of a religion that does not have a dogma, does not have a religious book, and is understood and practiced in such a myriad ways. So how would you give your sort of 1 paragraph summary of what it means to be a Hindu to an international audience?
So that's precisely it, that it is exactly a way of being, a way of life, and a way of relating to the cosmos. And how you actually choose to manifest that way is not prescribed. There are multiple choices, multiple beliefs, multiple ways of worship, multiple deities you can imagine to focus your worship on. It's a religion that is all-encompassing, that does not claim to be the only true religion in the world, that accepts all other paths and all other forms of worship as valid, and that at the same time is full of questioning and incertitude. It in many ways is a religion for the thinking, doubting skeptic of the 21st century, because it invites you. I mean, even the Rig Veda's creation hymn, the Nasadiya Sutta, says, you know, where did this come from? Who created it all? What's this all about? Maybe he in the heaven knows, or maybe even he does not know. Can you imagine a religious precept that actually casts doubt on the omniscience of the Creator? But that's precisely what Hinduism does. Everything is open. We have no Hindu Vatican. We have no Hindu Pope. We have no Hindu Sunday. You can worship any of the 7 days of the week. You can dedicate that day to any of your deities. We have no compulsory obligations or rituals. We have so many sacred texts that 1,000 years ago, Adi Shankara had to confine himself to a limited number to give his interpretation of the faith when he was trying to revive Hinduism. So who am I to sit here and try and give you a 1-sentence definition? It is all of this, and it is not something else. It is in many ways, I've made the slightly provocative argument at the end of my book, that in many ways it's a perfect faith for the 21st century, because in this networked world, it's kind of an open source faith. It takes ideas from everywhere, that in this world in which there's a resistance to absolute hierarchies, there are no absolute hierarchies in Hinduism. In a world in which there is skepticism, there is doubt, there's even talk of post-truth, Hinduism is a religion that acknowledges that the greatest truth is the admission of the existence of other truths. So all of this, I mean, I have very, very sort of little doubt that mine is itself a partial explanation, and that for the explanation I give, others can give another one. But mine is based on a very wide and rather detailed reading of spiritual texts over a long period of time that I've tried to distill into this understanding. But it's very close to the way in which Hinduism was taught and preached 1,000 years ago by Adi Shankara. Then, of course, various revival and reformist movements came. Then Swami Vivekananda gave it the modern coloring in the last decade of the 19th century. And Swami Vivekananda's Hinduism is what I would say is my Hinduism, and that's what I'm anchored in. That was from my teenage days, that's what I believed and read and practiced. And I don't believe that that Hinduism is often properly understood by those who claim to be speaking in its name. And that becomes a particular challenge, but that I know is not what this is about today.
But then where is the sort of religion in this? It sounds to me like you're making the case for something that's very, like there's skepticism at its heart, and there's pluralism and liberalism as well. Yes? So we're seeing pluralism, liberalism, and skepticism as the cornerstones of what you're defining, and you're saying it's very 21st century, it's open source. But then where is God? Where is spirituality? And I suppose I see you very much as promoting this idea, like Vivekananda, of the kind of Upanishad-based Hinduism, which is quite abstract, intellectual, all about Brahman, versus the kind of Puranic idea, which is much more about the stories and the folk tales and the kind of lived, embodied way in which people worship and actually sort of seem to think about deities. And
so they're both there, but it's also partly a question of the way the faith evolved. See, the original Hindu concept, you go right back to the ancient times, to the Rig Veda. The ancient concept of God in Hinduism was actually very similar, this is going to shock you, to the Islamic concept of God today. There is a God without shape, without qualities, without gender, without sound, without some God you cannot see or imagine, the Nirguna Brahman. This God, this spark, this idea that permeated the entire cosmos. But then, after a few centuries, the rishis began to realize this wasn't enough for ordinary people. They were going around worshipping trees and rivers and mountains. So they said, no, people need something to focus their worship on. So let's think of the Saguna Brahman. The Saguna Brahman is the God with qualities, with the way in which you can imagine this great deity. And when that idea of the Saguna Brahman came about, they also accompanied it with the same Rigvedic skepticism. They said, no one knows what authoritative image there is. I mean, you can't say God is this guy with a white beard towering above you in the clouds. There's no guarantee. It might not even be a male, right? So you are free to imagine God as you wish, because the imagination is itself an admission of our unknowing. It is for us a crutch on which to focus our worship of the absolute, of the divine, of whatever you want to call it, of the Brahman. And therefore, if you want to imagine God as a 10-armed woman riding a tiger, that's fine. You want to imagine God as a pot-bellied man with an elephant head writing on a tablet with a mouse by his side, that's fine too. But by the same logic, my friends, if you want to imagine God as a bleeding man suffering on a cross, that is fine too to the true Hindu. And that is something that people have to understand. Swami Vivekananda would say this. He said that which some call as Allah, some call as Jehovah, some call as Jesus, some call as Shiva or Vishnu, that's all the same thing. He used to quote the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, which says that just as many rivers flow, some straight, some winding, some downhill, some through valleys, and end up in the same sea, so also all forms and ways of worship end up at the same divine. So that is the reason why we have these different views. And don't forget, this is the oldest continuously practiced faith in human existence. It goes back 3,500 years. So inevitably it's evolved over time. Nothing stays static. There have been various ideas, various debates, various philosophies, various schools of philosophy. Within it, there have been various distinctions. There have been those who argued that God doesn't exist, that all that matters is the material world, the Charvaka philosophy. There are those who argued that you should renounce the material world, that it's all illusion, all that matters is the divine. All of this is permissible in Hinduism. You have to read and pick and choose. There are four forms. As Vivekananda brilliantly summarized it, the four ways in which you can be a good Hindu, right? So there's Jnana Yoga, which is through reading and knowledge. You find out about these spiritual ideas, as I've tried to do. There's Bhakti Yoga, which is what most people do. That is, they go and worship. You go to a temple, have a puja room at home, pray. That's Bhakti Yoga. Then there is Raja Yoga, which is interiority, meditation, looking for the truth within yourself. And that takes a fairly evolved person to be able to do that, and some do. And finally, don't forget, Mahatma Gandhi was a great practitioner of this. There's Karma Yoga, which is to actually worship God through serving humanity, through serving your fellow man and woman. Why did the Ramakrishna mission get set up? The whole idea was, rather than just going around preaching religion, let's go out and serve people. Let's educate them. Let's teach them science and mathematics. Let's actually give them some spiritual ideas and moral values, but along with practical tools for living. That's Karma Yoga. And all these four are equally valid, my dear Pallavi. So if you want, you can be a Jnana Yogi. If you want, you can be a Bhakti, complete total worshipper of particular your favorite deities. But you can also go off and be a karma yogi and go off and serve humanity and say, that's my worship of God. And the Hindu will embrace all of this and accept all of this. But in all of this, there is no place, I'm quoting Vivekananda again, he said, the Hindu will never light the fires of inquisition. There is no place for saying, mine is the only way. There is no place for saying, as some unfortunately claim in the name of Hinduism, they sort of reduce it to something like the team identity of the British football hooligan. And they say, you don't support my team, I'm going to hit you on the head. If you don't say Jai Shri Ram, I'm going to flog you. That's not Hinduism. That has nothing to do with Hindu Dharma.
So the politicization of Hinduism, the policing of its boundaries, that's something I think we must come back to. But to go back to Francesc, you talked about the 4 ways of worship, and your book also is about the 4 Purusharthas. And I think that you talk about karma, dharma, artha, and moksha. And the idea is to talk about the sort of Hindu path to happiness, success, and a meaningful life. So what are the sort of lessons that you've learned from your exploration of Hinduism as applicable to be able to lead this meaningful life, this happy life?
Many of them. Actually, after having written Ikigai and talking with our American publisher, he said that it would be interesting to find parallels between the Japanese philosophy and the Indian wisdom. And Hector, that is quite a scientific brain, he's an Asperger's person, very intelligent, he said, I have seen that there are some parallels between the Purusharthas and the circles of Ikigai. And some of them are very clear. So, for instance, if we are in Kama, it means the pleasure, the senses, the happiness of being alive. And in the first circle of Ikigai, we have what you love from life. So, in this philosophy of purpose, what we tried to do was to find in Indian wisdom and Indian masters some key concepts that can help us to run a better life. One of them, the detachments. This is something that I studied when I was teenager, more from Buddhism, but that is also present in other Indian religions. It's if you can love things and people in a free way, not to trying to control, not trying to make permanent what is impermanent, then you can love from freedom and you are not going to suffer. That was the investigation of Buddha. Another chapter is about karma, but understanding as responsibility. If you are aware that the place where you are now is the result of many little decisions, then you can control your karma, at least in this life. Let's not discuss afterlife here. So we try to take 5, 6, 7 concepts so that very common people in Europe, in the United States, in any country of the world, can have an introduction of this inner wisdom that if you are in peace with yourself, it will be easier that you are in peace with other people, and it will be also good for the world. Thank you.
So I'm not sure how many people in this audience have either heard of or read Francesc's earlier book, Ikigai, which is about the Japanese art of happiness. And, you know, it sort of has, it's summed up in a kind of Venn diagram, isn't it? Where you sort of talk about the purpose of life and, you know, something that you feel passionate about, something you are good at, and something that you can even make money at while you are doing it. And it's the intersection of all these axes, which is your Ikigai. I think what I find interesting is how hugely successful your book has been. There's virtually no, I don't know, airport in the world where you don't walk into an airport bookstore and see stacks of this Ikigai. And you now have Ikigai for teenagers and a whole range of spin-offs around it as well. My question to you is, like, obviously it has struck some kind of chord in this global audience right now. It's something that people seem to be hungry for, this kind of work. And I want to know from you why you think that this book, struck this chord, and what does that tell us about the moment that we're in.
Yes, I was publisher before being an author, and I can say that the literary success, as the success in any arts, you can understand only afterwards. So every book that gets global, it's a black swan. Nobody expected that. And when Hector and me were in Okinawa interviewing the centenarians, trying to write a chapter about Viktor Frankl, about Shoma Morita, about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, connecting Ikigai with many other things, we thought it would be a book for 1,000 people only. We thought we were writing a niche book for Japan fanatics. So after the book was published 8 years ago, only in 1 month we had already like 10, 12 translations. And after 1 year it was 50. And we didn't expect that. And I realized how big Ikigai was coming to India actually, because 1 month before the pandemic, I was invited by Penguin India to make a book tour in 5 cities. Then I was in Jaipur for the first time in this festival. And I realized how important it was for the people, because when I was in a taxi or in a rickshaw, children came to sell me copies of Ikigai, pirate copies, with our names badly written, Hector Garcia. And I thought, if this is the situation, it means that everybody knows this book. So I feel very grateful with that, and Hector too. And I think that in India, this book has interested many people because it's a country full of young energy. I have been talking with thousands of people through mail during the pandemic. We made many sessions in universities. And India is a country full of entrepreneurs, full of startups, full of new ideas, new projects. And for all these people to have a purpose in life, it's very important. And because of that, I think it's more influential Ikigai in a place like India than not Spain, that is a country of old people nowadays.
Shashi, what do you think? Like in the sense, why do you think that books like this, which are turning to ancient wisdom and trying to make them accessible for this modern moment, like what does it tell us about the modern moment that the huge bestsellers around the world today are all about people trying to seek these paths to happiness and self-fulfillment?
Look, I think it's partly because, frankly, we're living in a world in which the pressures on us are so much more. The sources of pleasure have multiplied, of both pressure and pleasure have multiplied to such an extent that we need to find some sort of path through it. In fact, in the ancient days in Hinduism, you go find a guru, and the guru will guide you in a certain direction. But in today's world, perhaps we can find a guru in an airport bookshop, and maybe it's Francesc Miralles telling you how to live.
Thank you.
So, I mean, the thing is that I think that's partly the answer to your question. Whether people are able to derive everything from the book and then actually practice it is a totally different matter. In fact, one of the reasons why there are still more books that are being written and more books being sold and more bestsellers is that that search is a never-ending search for some way of living and being that's better. I mean, in many ways, the Bhagavad Gita taught us a very simple rule, right? Do your duty without regard to the reward, without regard to the contrary. Just do the right thing and do the thing right. And thereafter the world will take care of itself. And that philosophy is not always easy for people to do. Most people are motivated by an outcome, by a particular result. They want to achieve something. They want to get a position, or they want to come first in the exam, or they want to get a particular job. And so that sort of Gita philosophy is kind of hard to remember. But once you've internalized it, it makes life very much easier to live. You have a clear conscience, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and that's where the purpose comes in. And thereafter, yes, if other factors, including factors beyond your control, it could be somebody else was simply better than you were at it. It could be that there were unfair factors working against you. It could be that others who made the decisions behaved wrongly and betrayed their own dharma, whatever it may be. You may not get what you want, but you have done what you can, and there is no point being frustrated and miserable because you've done everything the best way you could. That's all you have to do. And I often, when I'm constantly being asked to give advice to young people, college students, high school graduates, whatever, I always tell them, look, be the best you that you can be. Nobody else can be you. Find out what you're good at, find out what matters to you, find out where your talents are, and just develop them. Never let yourself down. Be the best version of yourself that you can be, and the rest of the world will take care of itself. It's kind of a modern reworking of the Gita philosophy.